Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to give everyone a few minutes just to join. We are expecting a good few hundred participants, and I can see that some of you have already started completing the poll. So that just gives us a bit of a sense of what you're interested in, why you're interested in who you are. So we've got lots of dads, which we would expect. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to just do that. See, I think these days people are getting better at, if everyone was in there or actually physically in the office, they might register for something like this, but then when it comes to it, they get distracted or something happens. But we know we haven't got any traveling to meetings, so you can be at your desk to do it if you want to. Oh, hi, Ian. Ian's saying good morning to everyone.
Hey, Ian.
We're really lucky to have Ian Dinwiddie on the chat. So for any of you who joined our last one of these, he was a wonderful speaker, and he's agreed to keep an eye on the chat because sometimes we struggle to talk and read at the same time. But today we really, really want it to be interactive. So whilst we're chatting, if thoughts spring into your mind, if you want to share any of your own experiences, or you want to disagree with any of us, do let us know in the chat, because it would be great to kind of have that interaction with the audience as well as listening to us, because this is really just a conversation to share lots of ideas. So I think we'll give it another minute or two before we get started. See, the numbers are still climbing. Anyone who's just joined, we're waiting just another minute or so to get started. So far, I'll put my glasses on. 66%. Can you guys see the poll results as well? Well, you can't. 66% of our audience are dads, 18% are mums, 11% in HR or D&I or something like that, and 5% are allies for gender equality. Thank you. Okay. So I think I'm going to start with the welcome and introduction, just because you've got so much that you can share with us. So welcome everybody. I'm really, really delighted to be hosting this session on a topic that myself and my co-panelists really passionately care about. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a former primary school teacher and I've got 4 kids myself. And 19 years ago, when I had my first child, I founded Educating Matters. And essentially what we do is we work with a broad range of organisations globally, addressing topics such as educating children, positive parenting skills, integrating work and family, neurodiversity, LGBTQ, allyship, mental health, and well-being. But over my 25 years in education, I've had the opportunity to engage with many thousands of dads. And over that time, I've witnessed tremendous progress in terms of fathers playing a much more active role in their children's lives and striving just as much as mothers for that healthy work-life balance and feeling that pressure to have it all. However, there is still more work to do. So many fathers I speak to don't feel as comfortable requesting flexible working hours, and if they do, their requests are more likely to be rejected than those coming from mothers. They still worry about how they will be perceived by their colleagues. There is a bit of maternal gatekeeping going on, and take-up of shared parental leave is not nearly as high as it could be. And there are plenty of misguided perceptions and gender stereotypes flying around, and we haven't yet reached a stage where the role and responsibilities of fathers are acknowledged and respected in an equal way to mothers. So we are really, really privileged today to hear the perspectives of 3 dads who I have admired from a distance for some time. And I'd like to ask each of them to begin by sharing with the audience a little bit about your own backgrounds and how you came to be such an active voice for modern day dads. So Elliott, would you mind starting?
Hi, morning everyone, welcome. Thanks for having me. So my name is Elliott Ray and I am the founder of a parenting platform called Music Football Fatherhood, which is all about open conversations about being a dad. So we create content and have a community and we have conversations to do with fatherhood. I'm really involved in like fathers in the workplace, been involved in lots of different research projects. We've been to the community, University of Birmingham early this year in Parliament as well. And as part of that, I go around and do engaging dads workshops and talk to companies about how they can be more inclusive for fathers. And I am also a diversity inclusion practitioner. I'm going to be the head of D&I at the Treasury from next week, actually. So in my personal life, I am a dad of 1 little girl called Eleni. I'm in her bedroom right now. She's at school. And a husband to Sneni as well.
Thank you. Okay, so Hanson, do you want to go next?
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again to Rachel and having me on, and great to be on this panel. So I'm Hanson. I'm the founder of Daddy Life. Daddy Life is a platform for modern day fatherhood, a community of just over 150,000 dads, mainly millennial. So we cover a range of different subject areas from health, fitness, lifestyle, modern day fatherhood. But Dads at Work has been really a core focus of ours over the last probably 24 months in particular, all around how we can start to change and shape the way that modern day organisations need to adapt and embed around modern day fatherhood and wider gender equality. So we led a piece of research with Deloitte last year called the Millennial Dad at Work, which was really the UK's first kind of in-depth look at what's happening for a modern generation of fatherhood at work and some of the barriers, particularly around flexible working, day-to-day line management, and some of the opportunities ahead.
Okay, thank you. And Michael, your story.
Hi, I'm Michael Ray, all the way from Australia, not related to Elliott Ray, believe it or not. I speak to different organisations and groups and young men about some of the outdated gender expectations that are having a negative impact on all of us at organisational and individual levels. I came to this after being banned from my daughter's 4-year-old ballet concert, banned from backstage area because I was a male. Until then, I've been blissfully unaware. I'm a solo dad. My daughter is now 9, but at that time it was just her and I, and it got a little bit misinterpreted that I was campaigning for men's rights at the time, and my objection was mainly that it was going to mean that my daughter would be the only child backstage without a parent, simply because of my gender and no other reason. And since then, it's just flowed on that it's actually become more of a women's advocacy or women's rights that I do, because until men are held equally responsible for raising the next generation, women will struggle to achieve that true equality. So until fatherhood is actually spoken about in the same glowing terms as motherhood, and we're accepted as competent, co-equal and equally as important, we're just not going to get past this hiccup in the road that just doesn't suit anyone.
Absolutely. So Yui, I'm sorry about the background drilling that just happens to happen. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but all 3 of you speak extensively to dads from a whole, a wide range of backgrounds and working in different sectors. And I wanted to get a sense of what you see as being the greatest barriers to enable working dads achieve that healthy integration between work and family. This is actually a question, I'm going to launch a poll that I also would like to ask the audience. And with those poll questions, if there is something that isn't listed on there, then do share it in the chat. But if you each tell me what you think, but also we get a sense of what our audience is saying. So Hanson, would you like to start this time?
Get myself off mute. Sure thing. Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and I think you covered it at the start as well. Around we're now in a space, 2020 coming to the end of what's been an incredible year, and entering 2021, where I think the workplace in particular hasn't been as quick to adapt to some of the changes that we've seen at home, where fathers are playing a far more active role. So again, another piece of research we did actually before the Millennial Dad piece was called the Dad Index, which was all about profiling exactly where and how dads right across the country were getting more involved. And I think that discord between work and home, unfortunately, hasn't, particularly with what's happened over the last few months going into a year now, hasn't really kind of narrowed. If anything, it's widened. And I think there's still an awful lot of organisational barriers that we need to start to address. And it's great that we've got people like Michael, people like Elliott, many more I know as well, who are starting to drive a sort of change that's really needed. And when we look at some of what we've done with organisations, there's two main themes that we often see. One is the sense of what I often call that the boardroom dad versus kind of the more modern day dad, where we see a lot of tension between perhaps previous ways of working and the perception of fatherhood of just fathers that are just there to be at work and that's it. And actually that lack of empathy around what's happening with a more modern day generation of fathers coming through. And that tension really that exists in the workplace because of that. And I think the second is because of the culture that exists as well, some of the actions and some of the opportunities for just men themselves, I think, to drive that change is something that we started to see in some of the more forward-leading organisations, whether that's better allyship for parents and carers, whether that's around unique roles and unique initiatives for dads in particular. But I think there are some significant organisational challenges, but also some really good opportunities, I think, ahead, particularly for next year, of how we can start to bring work and family together.
Thank you. How about you, Michael? When you speak to dads, what are you hearing is the big barrier?
It's death by a thousand cuts, Rachel. With it starts off. We know the preponderance of research shows that fathers who are actively involved pre-birth stay extra involved after birth. So I think we would need to see things enshrined in our workplace agreements, like the right to attend scans and all of the pre-birth things to help drive things. For too long, we've spoken about pregnancy and childbirth just as it affects women. And because of women's fantastic advocacy, all of the workplace initiatives and programs and legislation has actually reinforced and entrenched the mother as the caregiver, in my opinion. And because fathers, basically, we kept our heads down, we didn't use our voice, which is one of our downfalls, and we let it go at that. So what happened was women actually, we've now increased the pressure on them because we've enabled them to increase their workload outside of the home while still carrying on the same workload within the home, because there wasn't a concurrent focus or a non-gendered approach to it. So we offered all of these initiatives and entitlements to women with the flexible work and all the rest of it. So they came from a time when men were either seen as uninterested or incapable of caring for children, both of which we know isn't true. And we have the maternal instinct and mother knows best and all of these outdated fetishized depictions of mothers that make men doubt themselves and defer back to mum. Here in Australia, our parental leave is 18 weeks. I think the average for the OECD is 55, but only one parent can take it. So while we got rid of the breadwinner entitlement where men could be paid more because they were providing for their family, we simply just replaced it with primary and secondary caregivers. So men face the same barriers to caregiving as what women did back in the 70s with entry into the workforce. So all of these things snowball into one great big thing that just death by a thousand cuts, where men don't see themselves, they second guess themselves, they defer to their wives because they believe this mythical maternal instinct And it just simply comes down to time in role. So when you get home and your wife settles the baby a lot better than you, it's not because she has some innate internal maternal instinct. It's just she's practiced to it. And that's why I say to dads, my mum raised 3 kids. 2 of them turned out fine. And my mum couldn't settle my daughter as well as I could, simply because I knew her better, because I spent more time with her. So all of these things, we just need to, you know, reset and go, you know what, let's encourage dads and help them.
Absolutely, I really agree. Elliott, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely resonate with what we were saying, Michael, there. I think we're looking at it in the context when we're looking at where that dad works. So if we're talking about industries, office jobs, where we can work flexibly and that's more available to us just naturally by the nature of our work, then there's a set of challenges there. But I'll start with the other set of challenges of people who maybe work in manufacturing, you know, jobs where men are disproportionately represented in those areas, and jobs which are harder to work flexibly. It's harder to implement policies where you can work flexibly, where you can leave to do the school pickup, where you don't have to be there to physically do your job. So there's a guy that lives opposite me. He works on the roads, and for him, he has no choice to kind of leave early to do the school pickup like I will be able to do. It's more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult. And I think there's challenges there for those organizations to really think about what is it they can do around shift work, or other things that can be done remotely, or people kind of working in blocked hours, which gives them more flexibility to be at home for those important times. And I think that Michael was saying, being at home to do the bedtime is important. Building that bond with your child, you know, it's difficult to bring that bond back after 1 or 2 years when you haven't been there in the early stages, because your child doesn't know you as well, and it's like you're kind of reintroducing yourself. But I think in those industries, definitely there's things around just the workplace policy and things for the organizations and industries to address. I think when we're talking about kind of office jobs and where we can work from home and we're mainly on our laptops and computers at home, but there I would say the poll is right around gender expectations. So Working Families did a piece of research a few years ago and found, I think it was 58% of men had lied about going to appointments with their children. They've said that they are sick rather than they've got to go to care for their children. I think it was 10% of parents, dads of disabled children had not disclosed that to their line managers. And I think there is something in, with organizations having good policies, that is great. A lot of companies do have flexible working policies now, and you know that is really good. But actually, when it comes to you're at work and you have to leave that meeting, or you have to say I'm working from home that day because my child is ill, or I need to leave that away day because I need to go and do the school pickup. Does that dad feel in themselves that they can do that? Do they feel that's going to have a impact on their career progression? Do they feel like their colleagues are going to make snidey remarks and jokes about it that's going to be in jest, you know, but make them feel a certain way? I think that is the biggest barrier, really. It's culture, and it's how we can make sure that not only we have the policies in place, but we actively encouraging dads to be involved in their children's lives. And that means that you have to be proud to get up and leave that meeting early. You have to be proud to say you can't make that because you're doing a school pickup, and everyone has to encourage you and accept that, and that has to be the norm. I think once that is the norm in workplaces, then we can get to the place where I think men and dads are happy to really balance, like we are seeing mothers doing, their childcare responsibilities and their work as well.
And Elliott, what you were just describing is definitely what I hear directly from dads. Just to share the poll results, so you know, it's a really strong indication. We've got over, you know, a good few hundred people, and the gender stereotype and the old-fashioned perceptions, which I think, Michael, is what you were really talking about as well, has clearly come out as the top. What in your experience? I can't possibly. There's amazing chat going on the side. I don't know if any of you've been able to read it. My brain, women are. This is a stereotype. We're meant to be able to multitask, but I can't focus on what you're saying and read that at the same time. What we are going to do, by the way, because there's so much great content in this chat as well, is after the session, I'm going to share some of that chat, we can maybe take the individual names out, but just so that everyone can get a sense of what people have been saying. So we've kind of spoken a bit about the barriers, but what practical steps can be taken by organisations to encourage workplaces to break these traditional stereotypes around gender and parenting? And maybe specifically, I think someone's mentioned it, but some of these roles, I'm just going back, I did have a little look, but these roles that are less flexible, like you described, Elliott, your neighbour across the road. And how do we move, closer towards that culture where the role of a father is regarded in the same way? And a dad can say, sorry guys, I'm leaving. I mean, no one's going to sports day or Christmas parties or, plays or anything like that, because we can't at the moment. But where a dad can say, I'm leaving early to take my daughter to a medical appointment, or I'm going to watch them at sports day, and they're not requesting half a day of annual leave or making an excuse, whereas a mother will maybe openly just say that. So it's kind of what can organisations do? Michael, what do you think?
The organisations I've worked with, and one of the ones where we had a win for a manufacturing type one, which was a national panel beating company, we looked at early shift and late shift. So we got the guys to decide who would like to come in and start at 6 a.m. and finish at 2 p.m. and then rotate it around, and the other guys would come in at 9 p.m. and finish at 9 a.m. and finish at 5 p.m. and they would rotate. And it worked out better for the company because people could drop their cars off before and after work. They could do the school run, and it worked out really well. So it's about being creative and realising that our families and our children aren't an interruption to our work, they're the actual purpose of it. And as an organisation, if you're not thinking about how you can support your workers, it's like running your car on the red line the whole time. Eventually they're going to break down, and I forget what the statistics are for fathers who are actively looking to change jobs. But, retaining talent and experienced talent is pretty important and pretty vital for things. But in a lot of organisations, they're busy patting themselves on the back going, great, we now instigated a shared parental leave. And then when you say to them, what's the percentage? Oh, we've got about 3% of dads taking it. Well, it's not like Fight Club where the first rule of parental leave is never mention parental leave. So you need to offer enticements. And I think the government could play a bit of a role in that by setting some tax breaks or some incentives somewhere around that for organisations that do have a high uptake of it, whether it be through some sort of tax relief. But the other one I say to guys is leave loud and leave proud. Don't leave your jacket on the back of the chair and sneak out to do the school run and come back in. Make it be known, because the culture starts at the top, and everyone knows that we're here for our family. And what's a great dad? He's a great provider. And what's he providing for? Well, he's providing for his family. And it's not just monetary. As dads, we provide examples for our children. We provide nurturing. We provide all of these things. So it's not just a monetary thing. And dads need to get rid of this, my job is to provide and protect. Well, you need to provide connection. You need to provide love. You need to provide the example of all of these things, and take as much pride in that, and forget about the young guys that they're going, oh, I worked 80 hours and I sent off 300 emails last night. And well, that's great and good luck to you. But, I've got a priority here. Take pride in it.
Yeah, Michael, I love the way you put that. Thank you. Elliott.
Yeah, no, well said, Michael. I think I think just probably the most effective thing I've seen, or one of the most effective things I've seen of working with different companies is, as Michael's saying, dads that are very proud of their roles and they're not hiding that. And if they're senior, the better. So I worked in Department for Transport a few years ago, and my line manager was the Director General. He had 3 daughters, and he was very, very open about his parental responsibilities. He worked from home on a Friday. He would leave sometimes. This is one of the most senior people in the department. And I was the chair of the Young Families Network at the time. So of course I got him to tell his story. He was one of our case studies. We got involved in panels. I think when you're seeing people at a senior position doing that, it sends a really strong signal to everyone else to say, this is okay. You know, if they can do it, then I can do it. You know, and that is really, really important. I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago. I won't say the company, but someone who was very senior in that company, he was brilliant. And he said that in the lockdown, where he's actually spent time at home before, he was mainly working in London all week and then going home on the weekends. His son said to him, asked him where he lives. And he said that was the most shameful, embarrassing thing that anyone had ever said to him, because of course he lived at home. He was just away so much for work. And he said this on the panel, and there were a few hundred people on the call. And I thought, you know what, having someone that senior that is now, you know, working in a different way, he's at home now, he's saying he's building a better relationship with his children. He's really thriving. He's obviously still doing a really good job. For me, that's amazing role modeling. And I think it's where we can get those allies that are really proud to be vocal about their work-life balance, to talk about it. And I think when we're thinking about culture, you know, it has to be something. Changing culture takes time, and it has to be something that is done on a daily basis through the deep work, the conversations, and really engaging people. And I want to talk about Aviva. So Aviva are really good. They've done some great work around equal parental leave for both the mum and the dad, and they're a really good company in terms of policy. I was at an event with them earlier this year before lockdown, and the guy who implemented that policy, I asked him, I said, how was that successful? How did you land that policy so you had a good take up? And he said that in the year leading up to the implementation of the policy, they did loads of work to talk to people, to consult with people, loads of communications, loads of events, to really talk about why they are introducing this equal parental leave policy, what they want it to achieve, and how they want people to interact with it and how to apply for it, and really did a lot of the work. And I think they've had really good success rates because they did that early work. And that early work is essential for me. You know, putting up a policy on the internet will only go so far. You have to be talking to people, you have to be doing events, you have to be showcasing your role models, you have to be holding people to account where you see bad behavior as well. And if you can do all those things over a period of time, we will get there. We'll get to the place where we do see more equality when it comes to parenting in the workplace.
Yeah, Elliott, I really agree with you about role models. The only sometimes thing that I hear when I work with dads in a corporate setting is they'll say, yeah, well, it's okay for someone in this really senior role. You know, they've got enough, they're earning a salary that enables them to take that flexibility. And so sometimes when they're kind of all singing and shouting and it's only that one person at the top that they're talking about, and then they feel, well, what about how we're going to be perceived and how it's going to impact on our career progression? So what I see is having role models in very different positions within a business as well. Because obviously someone senior is brilliant, but then some of the other people are thinking, well, it's okay for him, he can do that. Hanson, what about you? I know this is a topic you've spent a lot of time thinking about and researching.
Yeah, I think what the guys have discussed, particularly around role modeling and like bringing your own dad identity to work more overtly, is absolutely spot on. I think there's two things I'd build alongside that. I think the first one is, and it's, I guess, tackling the age-old question of what really moves businesses, and having, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the time, particularly in kind of presenting wider, more cultural programs of shift, having the numbers behind you is never a bad thing. But that's actually where we're seeing a lot of encouragement. So dads actually just starting to take action and just starting to vote with their feet, so to speak. So probably the one stat from the research that really, you know, I was hugely encouraged by in the Millennial Dad at Work last year was that we found that a third of all dads had actually left their jobs since becoming a father in order to try and get better parental balance, and another third were actively looking. So you've got this situation where 2/3 of fathers are potentially in some level of flux, and that commercially for any business, you know, is something that they definitely need to pay attention to. So I think just being super clear on that, because to an extent, a lot of that change is already happening. And I think organizations that aren't on the bandwagon and doing something actively about it will find themselves very quickly at a point where a lot of their talent will soon be out the door, or at least be actively looking. I think the second thing as well is, I'm not always sure it's as clear, and whether, I think for a generation of fathers who are perhaps learning a lot of new things around and challenging themselves, and perhaps of them wider than just themselves, around what they really want out of family success, whether it's actually clear all the different definitions of what flexible working is. So I think for too long, we have this kind of perception, or a lot of people have a perception of it being, it's this working from home, or it's this compressed hours. Well, actually, it can be a range of things. I think this is what Michael was saying earlier as well, that whether it's working from home, whether it's compressed hours, whether it's job sharing, whether it's a range of different things, whatever works for you in your setting. I know that's easier said than done for certain situations, certain roles, but there is, if you like, flexibility within flexible working for us to start, I think, for organisations to make much more on a case about what works for you, and it isn't necessarily a one size fits all there.
And do you think, I mean, we can't really have this whole conversation without mentioning the pandemic, but now that people have, adapted to new ways of working and have almost been given more autonomy. So they sometimes, if we go back to, I know, some people are dialing in from abroad where schools haven't gone back, but when you're literally in that situation where your children are at home and they're not at school and you're trying to work, you did have to consciously think, what are my boundaries? And I may have to work in a different way, but I'm still going to get the job done. I've also seen so many articles over this period about mothers, mothers are bearing the brunt of childcare and the household duties and that mental load, that famous mental load. Is there any truth to that narrative, and how can we change it? And also, do you think this experience of the last 8-9 months with so many more fathers, they may have been physically at home, whether or not they're actually able to really be with their kids, but being at home will really accelerate authentic change? Or will we just gradually slip back into old habits? And I was also going to ask the audience, once they get back to normal, whatever that means, what changes do you intend to make to your usual work patterns? So we'll launch that poll, but I want to just get a sense from you. I mean, maybe we'll go back to Hanson. What do you think? Is this really been this period it's like a revolution in so many things, online shopping versus retail, and so many things are changing in habits. But will that last for parents?
I'm going to be really honest with you. I think it's actually led to some really worrying things, the pandemic. I think particularly for women and mothers, and I've got to start there, because we've probably all seen either the Jolie's work at Pregnant Then Screwed, or the IFS studies that have just showed how much more of that load on women there's been, and actually just how much more like maternity discrimination there's been, like particularly around furloughing. And in a way, I think we're at this really quite sad juncture, really, where it's kind of threatening to undo a lot of the good work around gender equality over the last few years. And I think it's worth mentioning that as context, because what we've seen, so we ran our own Dads in Lockdown survey earlier, and we found actually what you were just saying there, Rachel, that actually a lot of dads who perhaps haven't been as involved as before have actually now been thrust into this new situation of actually what's possible, and actually had to sort of shred some of those beliefs and perceptions and stereotypes that they've perhaps been carrying along even than themselves. And it's been a really encouraging picture, I guess, in terms of certain men and dads who haven't necessarily been as involved before. And we saw that through a lot of that lockdown survey. But I think the kind of bigger picture for me is it doesn't work if one party is losing, if another party is winning. I think we've got to come to a point where actually, whether it's mum and dad, dad and dad, mum and mum, whatever constitutes the shape of modern day family, what actually is thriving for that group of people. And I think that's where I think we haven't really equalised that balance yet. And I think that's going to be crucially important next year. How can we ensure that actually, and whether it's like better allyship at work for both mums and dads or carers as a whole, to actually come together in new ways, that we've started to see and implement that for a few organisations, or whether it's something else entirely. I think it's time for almost what that family unit is to start to be represented together, because I think that's the power in number that's going to drive a bigger shift.
And a lot of those conversations actually start with partners before we even think about work. Like sometimes people are not, if you are in a relationship, having that clarity and really openly communicating about where you see your role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Elliott, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I wish I had a crystal ball I can see into the future to know. I mean, so I looked at some ONS did some research, and they found that men are taking on more of the childcare responsibility than they were before. I think there's a 58% increase in the childcare undertaken by men, even though women are still doing the bulk. And what I think is interesting is to see how jobs are going to be designed. So not jobs for dads or mums, or just what is work going to look like next year? Because obviously we're all most of us are at home now. For me, I don't plan on really going back to a office next year if I can avoid it. But that decision is not totally mine. That decision is going to be, some of my autonomy and my influence and whatnot. But a lot of it's going to be up to the organization that I work for, in them saying, okay, has that worked for us? What we did in 2020, what can we learn from that? And they'll be looking at it from a few different perspectives. So the bottom line will be one of their major things. If they can save money on an actual bricks and mortar building, that'll be a good thing. They'll look at productivity of their staff, well-being of their staff as well. I hope to think that a lot of companies, and the ones I speak to, are thinking about what can they take from what has worked well, and taking those elements and implementing them next year. So I don't think we're all going to be working from home for the whole 2021. But as we can see from the poll, I think a lot of people are looking to make either major or small tweaks. And I hope that those tweaks are going to be things like more home working, more flexible working, moving to a role that allows them to design their home life and their work life as they would want. I think the dads that I speak to in our community, in the MFF community, have really, even though this year has been stressful, I think that has probably been, the fact that they've got to know their children more in some instances. They've got to have a better balance, build better relationships. That has been one of the positives from this year. So on a personal level, from what I see in our community, is that from the dad's perspective, I think there will be that drive and that determination to carry some of what we've experienced this year on. But I think that, as I said, that decision is not kind of solely up to them. And I think it is now, when I talk to companies, really making sure that they know that now is a pivotal moment. Like what we do in the next 3 months and the next 6 months is going to have an impact on a generation. How we respond to this moment and what we do to change the way we work for the positive is really going to have an impact. And we're not going to get this window forever. This is a short window and we need to really capitalize on it. So I am really trying to get those messages as strong as possible to the dads, but more so to the companies that are going to be dictating a lot of the policies around how jobs are designed.
And it's obviously not just a thing for parents. I mean, everyone's experienced working differently, and you could be single and have no responsibilities, but feel that you're more productive for certain elements of your job doing that from home and not feeling you have to be seen to be in there every day. Michael, what do you what are your thoughts on this?
Well, being a solo dad, I didn't have a lot of the shift in roles or anything like that, but I don't think the pandemic actually changed anything. It's been like a massive engineering stress test that's just exposed the weaknesses and the cracks in the systems that were able to function as long as everything was running smoothly. And I'm always wondering, now that we've exposed them, are we going to go, right, well, this amount of stress, this impact is never going to happen again, so we should continue with a flawed thing that has its pinch points, and the commute and everything like that, the extra time fathers got to spend. The majority of dads I speak to, now that the genie's out of the bottle for them, they want to keep some level of flexibility. They've enjoyed it. I just hope that work from home and flexible work isn't judged on this experience with the pandemic, because homeschooling, all the rest of the pressures, the uncertainty that was thrown in on top of it, I hope we can separate, you know, the stuff that's a once in a lifetime type thing and judge it on what it's worth. But I'm always amazed how we're waiting for some piece of workplace program or initiative or legislation to bring equality to society when we don't have it in our own homes. And if we begin at the beginning and we have equality in the home, equality will have to be disrupted rather than manufactured outside of the home. So if I come home to my partner and say, great, I've been offered a promotion, but it means I'm away from home traveling 2 weeks out of the month, and she says, well, you know, that will stop me being able to do my job, and you turn it down. But this is a discussion that couples have. Then eventually the workplace will have to adapt and to accommodate the workforce. At the moment, the workplace is shaping family dynamics in just a way that doesn't benefit the family dynamics. So I think we've got the tail wagging the dog for too long. And now the masses may rise up and go, you know what? We could do it when it suited you, or you could do it when it suited us. Let's meet somewhere in the middle so that we can all get the best out of this.
So we've had a few questions come through in advance, but I want to give our audience an opportunity to ask some things. Maybe I'll start with some of the ones that were sent through, and I don't know how you're going to decide who wants to, whoever speaks first, I suppose. But we had a tiny mention of this. What role do you think even governments can play to improve family matters for fathers and obtain more gender equality? I mean, this is kind of going back to policies, but I think you might say it's more work on the ground in your own homes and in your own environments that's needed. But I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I'll go. All of the gendered equality initiatives remove the gender. Parenting seems to be the last bastion as far as having the gender filter removed from it. We now call, you know, a policeman's a police person, a chairman is a chairperson, but we still have mums and dads. And I often get told I'm a great dad. And no, I want to be a great parent, because there's still the different bar. You know, the bar is a lot lower for a great dad. Basically, if I don't drop her too often and manage to get her shoes on her feet, you know, you're a great dad. And I think the government can play a huge role in that by removing any trace of gender in any of the initiatives. And as much as we have workplaces where we're very conscious about harassment and things like that, we also need to protect fathers as well from derogatory type things as far as our parenting and things like that. I notice in the UK, they've just recently had advertising standards for depicting dad in a demeaning way. And all of these little things, they mean a lot. They carry on, because the bumbling daddy daycare thing, it all feeds into the thing. But again, it puts pressure back on mums. So mum's judged a lot more harshly on a parenting fails than a dad. So, you know, a mum with a career, she still suffers but what about your kids? Even though she's got a full-time stay-at-home dad with them, she'll be judged on that. And dad gets the reverse. Yeah, but, you know, don't you miss work? So I think governments can play a big role in going back through. We need to remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg's first ever sexual discrimination case in the Supreme Court was to fight for a right to have the same access to a carer's tax break as women do. So, you know, we've gone, the pendulum swung too far in one direction without realizing the vacuum that it's created in its wake.
Do you know, just to come in there, I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of my favorite ever sayings, and it's coincidentally also the book of that James has written. I see he's very active in the chat, which is Dads Don't Babysit, It's Called Parenting. And if there's one thing that just kind of nailed the attitude, it's totally that. And I couldn't agree more with what you're talking about, being parenting being the sort of the last gendered area. The one, I guess, area in addition to that, in terms of government policy, is, I think, to build on what Michael's saying, I think a lot of our parental policies are still very maternally focused. Like, even with shared parental leave, as great as that's been an important first step, as I remember being on a panel with the lawyer who actually worked with the government to bring that in a few weeks ago. The thing that it still hasn't necessarily focused on is it's still treated, if you like, indirectly, sort of this idea of primary and secondary caregiver. And I think until we can create a policy that is far more equal in its parental approach, we're still going to get those sort of swings and balances. I think that's where we need to really start to work, and the government really needs to start to work with businesses, and not just of big businesses. I think while it's brilliant that the likes of Aviva and Deloitte, there's been loads of organisations who've started to pave the way for more equal parental leave. I think we can't forget that the majority of organisations in this country are SMEs who probably either it's not on their agenda, or they genuinely haven't got the sorts of resources, people power, or budgets to necessarily put those policies into practice. And I think that's where the role of government is going to be really crucial in actually equalising that opportunity.
Yeah.
One of the things that amazes me here in Australia, our paid or partner leave is 2 weeks at minimum pay. So it's $719 before tax. So you guys are about $2 to 1 here. So, and dads don't take the full 2 weeks. Well, at $719 a week, when I earn 2 or 3 times that, it's got nothing to do with gender. It's a financial decision taken for the benefit of the family. And yet it's portrayed as men aren't interested, or men aren't capable. Well, mum has to recover from the birth. But as a couple, I don't see why the two of us, we can both go on annual holidays together, but we can't both take parental leave to raise our children as co-equal parents. So, and a lot of the problems that we face in society have their beginnings in less than optimal parenting. So it's dollars for donuts. I remember when we said we couldn't afford 4 weeks' pay. Here in Australia, we have 1 day off for a football grand final and 1 day off for a horse race. My goodness, and you can't both take parental leave together. If mum needs support, if mum's struggling with postnatal, or dad for that matter, and here where I'm from in Victoria, the first point of contact for new parents is called the Maternal and Child Health Centre. Well, where's dad go? Like, what a missed opportunity to scan dad for any postnatal or perinatal or any of the problems, but how to make him feel. I've never felt more like a third wheel than at these appointments, sitting in the corner while everything went on with mum and bubs. And straight away, the die is set for the parental roles and the involvement. You're the assistant, and you want to be the best assistant you can. But there's a mental load on mum, and there's the expectations and demands on mum.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think, yeah, great points, Michael and Hanson. Not too much to add, but I think just to emphasize those early stages, and if government could do more to support dads to have more parental leave in those early stages, more than the 2 weeks, I think is just so important. We know through research that the involvement of the dad in those early stages will have a big impact on their role going forward. And personally, I've seen it and experienced it. If you are getting stuck in, if you are doing the night feeds, if you're changing the nappies, if you're doing the settling in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're getting to the rhythm, and then it's natural to you. And I've seen dads, I remember when my daughter was young, and I think me and a friend of mine were going to take our children out, and they were both like a year old. We invited another dad, and he said no. And we said, oh, well, why not? And he said, because my wife can't make it. And we were like, wow, like, your baby's 1. And then kind of getting under the skin of it. Basically, he hadn't had that time early on, so he'd never really got comfortable with his baby on his own. And that was quite sad. That was quite sad that he wasn't comfortable taking his baby out. And I think the reality is that if we don't address those early stages, it's harder to fix later on. So I think we've got to really focus on that. And I think the wider point about governments just looking at gender expectations through media and those kind of things are important too. That's probably the harder fix, but ultimately, if we're saying, from my perspective, that the culture and the gender expectations are the main barrier, like how do we address those, not just through fatherhood, but wider around men and masculinity, even before men become dads.
And I mean, I love, at Hands-On actually did a post, I think it was in August, where you shared on Daddy Life this research into the science behind the role that a father plays, literally from birth through all the different phases. And one of the questions has been like, how do we better educate dads about this, this early childhood attachment and understanding? Because sometimes they only realize later, like, I've got a child who's at the stage of leaving home, and it goes in a flash, and they sometimes have that realization where they haven't built that connection early enough. I mean, I suppose that is about education, but how can we spread that message?
Yeah, so we're working with Dads Matters. They do work in Greater Manchester, and they're part of, I think one of the only parts of the country that have this in Greater Manchester. They are part of the NHS offer to new parents. So when you're an expecting parent, they will get involved with that dad before the baby is born and speak to them and invite them into conversations, share books, give them community, and support them through early fatherhood too. And seeing their work on the ground when it matters, and being a presence when that dad is going through this life-changing moment, and educating, not in a kind of preaching way, but just saying, hey, like, this is what you could do, this is kind of what we've learned works well, and sharing with like-minded, relatable people, and those kind of things really help. And I think something that we try and do for Music Football Fatherhood as well is be a voice for that. A lot of the people that come into our community are actually very new dads. They're expecting, or they're very new dads. And so, getting to them at that point, sharing messages with them, showing what good looks like to an extent, showing how other people have done it, showing how other people have designed their life to enable them to be involved in the early stages, I think is really important. But yeah, more services that we can get integrated into NHS, like they have done in Manchester, would be fantastic.
Yeah, just to build on that, so we've just finished another project looking at young fatherhood, and in Leeds they do something similar now. So they're looking exclusively and extensively, really, in particular around the health service and around some of the other support services. And I think when I think about all the key kind of touch points and experiences of when you're about to be a dad, those things and giving those opportunities for dads to kind of have either their own voice or just be known that actually, you're going to go through your own experience as well, so that they can be included as part of that journey. It's really, really important. And the stuff that I've seen Leeds City Council in particular start to do is really awesome, because it's starting to just reframe that conversation around health and around mental health especially.
So the fabulous James Miller has written something in capitals that we can't miss. But Elliott, if anyone doesn't know, has been collecting the most incredible stories of dads in his network to really share, to provide role models about fatherhood and dads, and also about topics that they wouldn't necessarily speak openly about. So we're all really, really excited to see that come off the ground and read those. But you're almost there, aren't you, with your crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, got a few £100 left to go. But thanks, James. How can I forget? That's all I talk about these days. But yeah, I think that'll be a key part. We've got a book. We've got 20 dads just writing about their fatherhood experience, from talking about things that I guess we'd all experience around identity, around time, work-life balance, that kind of stuff, to dads talking about some of the more, I guess, difficult subjects around miscarriage and widowhood.
And Louise is speaking about, postnatal depression for dads as well. And even, you know, the trauma of watching a birth. There's so many challenges that dads are facing in those early stages. One person has written the solution is to have twins, because then you have no choice about getting involved, because there needs to be two people managing two kids.
Yeah. But sharing those stories, I think, helps, doesn't it? Sharing those stories and letting men know that you can share your story, you know, because we're all experiencing something. Every dad has had a experience, but we don't necessarily hear about it so much because there's a variety of reasons why we don't hear and don't talk. But encouraging people to be more open, I think, is just the way that we help dads to really think about their role before they become a father, and think about what kind of dad they want to be before they become a dad is key. Really, really important.
Mm.
Do you know, if only we also had someone that was, say, like a D&I specialist around the government, that would be awesome. Oh, back to you. How's in your hands, Elliott?
Oh, yeah.
In your hands?
I'm on the case, guys. I'm on the case.
Yeah, you're gonna hopefully be a really powerful voice now, Elliott. No pressure.
Hopefully, we'll see. I need your help though. Can't do it alone.
This is an interesting question. Why don't dads share, do you think? Why is that? Is that again the cult, you know, the perception of men and dads? And I mean, I think they're getting way better at it.
I find when I get in a group of dads, the emotion, the depth of conversation, it's amazing. It's incredible to be a part of. But we don't gather as a tribe. Most of the time, I think when men get together, there's a distraction. We do it at the pub, we do it at the football, we get together where the conversation is a little bit of a side dish rather than the main purpose. Most mums I know have a bunch of friends on speed dial that, you know, will contact them just for a chat or come around for a coffee. With guys, there always seems to be an event that we need to get together. There's a party or some sort of that. But if dads groups, when they meet and when you sit there and speak to them, and it just evokes that, oh, me too, what about this? And, you know, who's had that? And it just flows from there. But, you know, I've actually found fatherhood from the outside. Fatherhood to me looked limiting and a little bit stifling. I've found it anything but. It's been the thing that's enabled me to find out who I am. And, you know, I've gotten to feed giraffes with my little girl. I wouldn't have got to do that before. And that's why I say to dads, like, just throw it out the window and do it your way. Forget about what you think it'll be. And for the dads who are working themselves to death, if you look at the figures for, you know, we don't study children's income levels, just the 20% that live in poverty, but there's no linear progression for income versus good outcomes for social, behavioural, educational, psychological outcomes for children related to income. So if it means giving up a little bit of your income to spend more time with your children who are connected and have present, involved fathers do so much better than otherwise. So if you think you're working yourself to death for your kids, for their benefit, you're not. And I understand some people find great satisfaction and purpose in their work, and that's fine as well. But don't think that you're doing it for your kids, because your kids just want you present. They just want as much time with you as they can. Yeah. And that's
I always say love equals time. That's all kids really want from you is your time and your understanding. And I find when I mean, I spend all day long talking to parents, but when it's an audience or it's a session specifically geared to dads, in that environment, they tend to talk more and open up than necessarily when there are mums in the room with them. I just want to share there's an amazing bit of feedback here from someone saying that they've even had a tear in their eye, as what we're saying resonates so much with the struggles that this lady's husband has experienced, you know, with wanting to parent and be involved in their children's life. So does anyone, I don't know if there's any further burning questions, but we're up to an hour and we've got everyone pretty much has been able to stay on. So we really, really, really appreciate your time And I always feel like, how can we carry this conversation further? Because I guess the people that are dialed in, they really, you know, understand the importance of all of this. But do any of you want to just end with a last thought or a word, or just, you know, a last couple of pearls of what fundamental changes will really facilitate this more inclusive workplace culture? Anyone desperate to say one last thing?
My thing is, I get a lot of guys say to me, I wish I had the time and connection that you have with your daughter. And that's why I say to them, well, keep wishing, you know, it's not going to do anything. Yeah. So many guys have this pinch point where it's just the stress between being pulled in two different directions between work and children. And that's why I say it's not going to fix itself. You've got to make a plan. So whether you downsize, whether you financially do it, but you've got to discuss it with your partner, of course, but fix it. It's not going to get any better. And soon your kids are going to be grown. I read a frightening statistic that said 75% of the entire time you'll spend with your children is before the age of 16. So it's just, you know what, you've got the rest of your life to work. Just don't miss it, because as they all say, on your deathbed, you're never going to say, I wish I worked more.
Mm-hmm. And also I find parents get so bogged down in all the demands of everyday life that you lose the sense of that bigger picture. And your main role as a parent is really raising an adult, like someone with has all the qualities and characteristics that they need to succeed in life. And we worry so much about their exam grades and their, you know, being fed and sleeping and all this stuff, but really it's thinking about, how do I instill, you know, values in my children and raise a child that has those qualities they need to succeed. And that's all through you modeling. I say parents are a child's first and most important teacher. They won't learn that stuff if you're not there to model it for them.
And it's got to be fun. Jane Goodall's favourite quote of mine, she said, if chimpanzees have taught us anything about parenting, it's that it should be fun. And you know, that's why I'd say, stop worrying about being judged for what sort of parent you are, and parent the way you want to be. And just, you know, think about how you want to be remembered. What do you want your kids to tell their kids about your, you know, what their dad was like, and be that dad. You know, share with them. Tell them when you're tired and when you're sad and all the rest of it, because if they don't see you do it, they'll feel awkward when they do it, and it's natural.
Absolutely.
So from my perspective, I remember being told something that's probably like one of the most pertinent stats ever for me, which is there's just on, depending where you live, there's just under 940 weekends until your baby is turned 18. And it just put everything in perspective. And you know, each day is literally ticking towards that. And what you choose to do with it is all in your hands, really.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think from my perspective, I think when we're looking at change and what we want to see in the world, I think it's very easy to wait for that change and wait for other people to take responsibility for it. And I'm a big believer in we have control. You know, we all have immense power to change the world in our own way. We just got to tap into that, and that starts at home. That starts with our own family. That starts with talking to your own friends and colleagues. That starts with challenging your employer. And that's the messages you put out on social media, the organizations that you support. You know, we can all do our bit, and this is a big issue and a big problem, but actually it's a very personal problem, a very personal issue, and it's for all of us to take action. And if we all do that, lo and behold, we will see the change we want to see. So I think it's about, you know, I always think about personal, what can we personally do, you know, what are we personally responsible for, and understanding the impacts that we can have. And we all can have a massive impact. So leading into that, believing that, and just practicing it every single day, and then we'll see what we want to see in time to come.
Well, thank you everybody so much for your time. I think I can't wait to share the chat with you, because there's loads in there. But really, really appreciate you giving the time, and for all of our audience for participating in this very, very important conversation. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers all.
See you,
Have a good one.
everyone. Take care.